Perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world is the condensation trail lie. What we're seeing in our skies is not condensation. It's sprayed particulate dispersions with very few exceptions.
They shouldn't be there. Jet engines burn clean. So if there's anything coming out of them, it's an additive.
They're absolutely not contrails. Contrails do not linger, dissipate, and go into cloud coverage, period, in the report.
And I kept saying to people, what is this? Because now the sky is no longer blue, it's starting to turn gray. And what I found was kind of like it was not socially acceptable. We're all going to pretend this is not really happening. And I thought, oh, this is very bad.
Most are unfamiliar with a science term called global dimming. That term refers to the amount of direct sunlight that no longer reaches the surface of the planet due to light scattering particles that are building up in the atmosphere. And although many of these particles are from industrialized pollution, the larger majority are from the ongoing climate engineering solar radiation management operations. This engine, a high bypass turbofan jet engine, this is the engine that is on all military tankers and all commercial carriers, is in essence a jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through this engine is non-combusted. This engine by design is nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. And again, we have film footage of aircraft flying at altitude with nozzles visible, turning on and off. That is the end of the argument. Since even before man could fly, there was an effort to try to modify the weather. We have weather modification patents going back 100 years plus.
These are historical films of what can be done with a biplane, a small biplane that carries a very small payload. And that much can be done. How much more can a fully loaded military tanker, KC-10, KC-135, C-17 Globemaster, how much more material can they put in the air? About 500 times more with a single tanker.
In regard to the condensation trail narrative, many refer back to the trails left by World War II bombers as proof that we are only seeing condensation trails in our skies. But geoengineeringwatch.org found on military archives film footage, which we posted, of World War II B-17s at altitude turning off a sprayed dispersion. We know that climate engineering was deployed immediately after World War II, so testing was absolutely ongoing. Clearly, these bombers were used for beta testing. Film footage proves it.
Weather was a weapon used over Vietnam. Would you expect that to be then deleted from the availability? No. To continue to expand the scientific aspects of it, to have it available in your portfolio of weapons would be a natural process. Therefore, should you expect that it is available on demand to have the ability to modify weather? Absolutely, within this country and others.
Climate engineering is the crown jewel of the military-industrial complex. Climate engineering has been used to destabilize and topple nations all over the globe, facilitating military occupations by hostile countries like the US. We know that some of these countries are having their precipitation cut off because they have stated so on the floor of the UN, like the president of Iran stating emphatically that NATO weather modification programs were cutting off the precipitation to Iran, but US media never covered it.
We have an economic model operating globally, which is operating based on covert force. And I have very serious questions after watching the financial patterns as to whether that financial force or that force includes weather warfare.
People were coming to me, telling me about this. So because of that, I went to the government in Ottawa under Freedom of Information. There was a 40-page report, of which half the pages were completely blank, and the other half had a lot of blank outs. But there was sufficient information to tell me that, yeah, they're aware. They call it geoengineering.
One of the big problems is that when we find some new technology, we get all excited by it, by the potential benefits of that technology, and often implement it and use the technology before we have any idea of the negative effects.
Shouldn't it be considered that every breath we take is laden with highly toxic particles that are wreaking havoc in our own bodies? Particles that aren't being reported by any air quality testing systems. Any official air quality testing are looking for PM10 or PM2.5, 2.5 microns at best. The climate engineering nanoparticulates are exponentially smaller. They go virtually unreported.
These nanomaterials generate reactive oxygen species in biological materials, damage tissue, lead to advanced aging, cause cancer, causative agents of dementia. So, yeah, we might think that we're doing something positive for humanity to save our species, but we're also poisoning ourselves.
Eventually, with the team that we formed at geoengineeringwatch.org, we were able to acquire a NOAA flying lab. We were able to test at altitude to confirm the elements that were showing up at the surface.
Our intention was to do a point-to-point sampling mission. We could see these obvious patterns that were being laid out in the sky. We were really thankful for the opportunity to be able to get up to altitude. And on the return mission, we noticed that that cloud layer had descended. And we sampled below the cloud layer, we sampled through that confluent layer and above it.
We found exactly the same elements listed in climate engineering patents, the same elements we found on countless surface tests of precipitation from all over the globe. Governments all over the globe and the entire climate science community are telling the population urgently that climate engineering operations, solar radiation management operations need to be immediately deployed to try to mitigate the warming of our planet, to try to preserve what's left of its life support systems. And yet when the public, those that are awake, try to bring to the attention of academia and elected officials that we see climate engineering already being conducted in our skies all over the globe. It's already been deployed. Lab tests prove it. Film footage proves it. Documents prove it. And yet we have the continued denial from the climate science community and official agencies telling us that we're not really seeing what we're seeing in the skies. They tell us if climate engineering were deployed, it would look exactly like what we're seeing in our skies, but then again, they tell us that we're not really seeing what we are actually seeing. The paradox is, the more the climate engineers spray the planet, destroy the ozone layer, disrupt the hydrological cycle, and increase the overall warming of the planet, the more they feel they have to ramp these programs up to try to mitigate some of the damage that these programs have done in the first place. That is the true definition of insanity.
As a society, we are like a freight train heading for a broken bridge that is just a few years away from us. And I think people don't understand the exponential increase of toxicity in the environment.
These operations should be considered the most insane endeavor ever deployed by the human race. These operations are systematically derailing all of Earth's life support systems in the attempt to blot out the sun. The myopic, short-term objective of trying to cool the planet while worsening the overall warming. The climate engineers, if these operations are allowed to continue, are pounding the nails into our collective coffins.
From a scientific perspective, and what we know about nanomaterials and their effect on human health and the environment, this is a serious problem. And it really does warrant further scientific investigation.
We need the answers to get to the bottom of this national security problem.
If populations around the globe find out what has been done to them by their governments without their knowledge or their consent, there will be a shockwave around the globe that cannot be contained by the criminal governments that have now taken control of our planet and civilizations all over the world.
Just bringing transparency will shift so many things that it will make it extremely difficult, because you cannot manage an entire planet with overt force, only with covert force. If we bring transparency to who it is in the covert force, it shifts everything.
Look at your own health and you know what is going on. And if you love your children, join us in fighting what we need to fight. This is a just fight, it's the right fight, it's the right cause.
And if the climate engineering operations, which are derailing Earth's life support systems, are not immediately exposed and halted, all other challenges for the human race become moot, because the planet will no longer support life. We are in completely uncharted territory. Virtually the entire web of life is being systematically contaminated and decimated by the ongoing climate engineering operations, on top of all other forms of human activity or anthropogenic activity that are wreaking havoc in the web of life. Climate engineering, mathematically, statistically speaking, is the single greatest and most immediate threat we collectively face, short of nuclear cataclysm. It's another larger specimen of black oak. It's mid-February. It's already leafing out. It's 2 months ahead of when it should be leafing out. The leaves last fall stayed on the trees, and in late November, December, when a certain series of rains comes, we've seen this the last 4 years, all the leaves on the deciduous trees wad up dead, but still hang on the tree. As you see lower down on this tree, that's what we have. It appears to us as if some sort of defoliant is included in the aerosol spray mix. And we know fruit farmers have been using this type of method to cause their orchards to go dormant for years. This is because the temperatures have been rising so progressively.
Defoliants remove the foliage or leaves from the plant. A week after defoliation spraying, the plants stand dry and almost leafless.
Defoliation, a maneuver designed to peel back the cover from which the Viet Cong spring ambushes on Allied supply convoys and troop movements.
Decomposition of forest floor duff, the materials on the forest floor, leaves, pine needles, twigs and sticks, is now almost non-existent. The soil microbiome has been devastated. The root systems of trees and forest flora are dying off, just as the crowns of the trees are also dying off. Climate engineering contamination is not only killing soil microorganisms, it is also causing trees to shut down nutrient uptake, which in turn initiates a slow, protracted death of the forest. Because of Earth's collapsing ozone layer, intense UV radiation is causing the stomata, the respiratory ports of trees, to shut down. Thus, trees don't respirate. They can't feed. They're simply dormant. The forest no longer smells like a forest because the trees are not breathing. Even during the spring and summer months, an increasing number of trees are growthless. What we are left with is stagnant, silent, dry, dead, and dying forests that are just a spark away from total incineration.
In order to try to understand what was going on with the bombardment of nanoparticles, I decided to test lichens. Now, environmentally, lichens only get their nutrients and energy from the air and from rain. I tested and found that the most common element found was aluminum. There are a number of things that happen with aluminum saturation. Rather than acidic, it creates a basic formula in the soil which favors some plants and destroys others. In root systems, it can have a significant impact on their absorption and nutrient uptake.
The pH of the rain is 10 times more alkaline than it used to. The pH of the soil is 10 times more alkaline than it used to. For acid soils, they've gone neutral. It hasn't gone much past neutral, but is still 10 times more alkaline than it should be.
The soil has been the most destructive entity on the planet. We know that the soil contains tens of thousands of different species of microbes, bacteria, fungi, helminth, viruses. that are absolutely essential for the soil to produce food that actually nurtures us.
A lot of work has been done on tobacco and wheat and rye grasses, that germination of seeds in the presence of nanomaterials, of aluminum oxide for instance, significantly stunts root growth and leads to a plant that has been compromised. Most of the oxygen that's being produced by our planet is produced by things like trees and algae and cyanobacteria. All of these life forms are negatively impacted by exposure to nanoparticles of aluminum oxide and other nanomaterials.
You see smaller plants in front with the very discolored leaves. That's fungal infection. As the bioavailable metals are killing soil microbes, changing soil pHs, changing forest soil compositions, it has a horrific domino effect. Whole specimens, mature specimens of manzanita flash out stone dead black from fungal infection.
In the geoengineering mix, these are nanoplastic particles that are spiked with aluminum, with titanium, with strontium. Basically, the oceans are covered with a sheet of plastic. The oceans can no longer evaporate the water that the atmosphere needs to keep the earth blue and green like it used to be. The algae in the ocean depend on a lot of sunlight in order to produce oxygen. And they can't do their job anymore because they're not getting the light they need. In the last 2 or 3 years, ever increasing articles about nanoplastics appearing in chicken, in fruit, in vegetables, and also in our human body. Every animal that we eat now is full of these nanoplastic particles. And these are certainly not animals that have swum in the ocean. These are land-based animals. They've never eaten a plastic bag, and yet they're accumulating these nanoparticles. And the only possible source of that is the air that they breathe.